like Ellie is the protagonist here.
Barely.
Barely. Well, I mean, as a show, like if you think about like who are we following, who do we want to succeed?
I want her to thrive. I don't want her to succeed in this mission.
Right. So like,
I think that's part of the pull of this that like makes it compelling, is that a person that you believe is a good person is going down a dark path that you don't want them to go down.
hello and welcome to Road Goes Ever On and On. Today, Sterling and I are talking about the hit post-apocalyptic TV show, The Last of Us, Season 2, Episode 5, Feel Her Love. So spoilers are ahead. And we would like to feel your love. If you like what you see, please give us a like. And if you don't want to miss any of our content, just hit that subscribe button and turn on that bell for notifications. And with that, Sterling...
Whoo!
We have a new mutation of the infected.
Okay, so I'm curious your thoughts on this, because I read that wasn't a new mutation in the game.
Yeah, so even in the first game, you get blocked by areas by clouds of spores that you can't walk through. And thematically, for how mushrooms and fungus reproduce, they do produce spores, and like they produce a lot of spores. So it would make sense. Like in my mind, I had always thought that the infection started through people ingesting spores. Like it didn't really make sense to me that they would just, like, who was the first patient to bite somebody, and spread it that way. To me, it was always spread through spores, so I was always curious why they never delved into that. So it is nice to see that they are finally bringing that aspect to it. Even 2 seasons in, I think it's still important and it makes more sense.
Yeah, that was quite interesting to me, because it definitely, seeing it felt like a big WTF moment of it's evolving. We now have smart ones that we saw in the beginning of the season. Now it's airborne. It seems harder to get away from, and it kind of makes it feel like, how do you deal with this? And I'm sure that in the game, I'm sure that was a way that they could sometimes maybe funnel you.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm kind of curious of the ramifications, because to me, especially not having this been canon the whole time and then bringing it in at this point, it feels like it's being done to really ratchet up the tension.
Yeah. Well, and in the game, it was more because Ellie was immune, she could walk through the spores. And so it would be a way to be you're Joel at one point, and it's oh, I need Joel to get across this spot, so we have to send Ellie through, climb up this thing to let him through, things like that. So it fundamentally made sense for the game. I think that it doesn't seem to really ramp up the tension as much for me, because I feel like the way that it is explained, it's not making these spores out in the open. Jackson, I feel is going to be fine. There's not going to be this giant cloud of infection that's going to get them. I think it's more of if it's in a localized spot, kind of how normal fungus would operate, in a cold, damp, you can't go into this one building anymore. But it's not, to me, unless it's an infected building, gonna just be in every single building. So it has the ability to be threatening, but also I don't think it's gonna be a huge problem for the people.
For me, I liked how it ratcheted up the tension, but I didn't necessarily love how it was executed. The flashback to me was a little bit, didn't quite make sense in a couple spots, where it's we'll keep this on a need to know basis, which I do get that. You don't want to spread fear, because that can spread pandemonium. And I'm sure that ruling over people is already tough without without fear of something crazy like this. But at the same time, it also means that somebody could go down there not understanding the dangers and like help it to spread to other people. And then the other part of like, okay, let's just seal it up. I'm sure it won't get through the vents because it hasn't already, which doesn't quite make sense to me. And we'll just keep using this building instead of like, we're in Seattle. I'm sure there's another hospital, because they said the whole thing of like, we
can't
need
lose this hospital.
We can't lose this hospital. It's like, I think there might be another hospital in Seattle. Maybe given enough time, you can move the hospital equipment to another building. It didn't. There were a few things that just kind of like stretched my like believability on this one a little bit.
Yeah, the vents thing I could understand because if they're not like running the vents, I wouldn't imagine that they would just float all the way up through each vent. I mean, they definitely could, but maybe not in a big enough amount. But I didn't really like how that was introduced either. It was just like two random characters that we didn't really know. And it was just like, oh, we're going to have
We kind of knew Hanrahan because she was the one who met with Isaac when he first offed his team.
Right.
And joined.
We did know her.
But like we barely knew her.
Right. Like we don't know much about her. It was just like, oh, are you Isaac? He's like, are you, what's your name? Like, that's all we got from
Correct.
That.
Yep.
And then it's just like, okay, no, now we're talking to this girl who lost her son, and it's like she had to like lock her son in there, and I don't know. It felt like it was a scene to just explain what was going to happen later, and
yes,
to be like, oh, okay, we're gonna set up this big scene with Ellie and Nora at the end, and we got to let you know that there's airborne infection, and you're gonna have to deal with that. So I don't know if it was my favorite way to explain this thing. Like, I almost feel like it could have been better. I think they could have done it better with maybe, since the wolves were in the hospital, they could have said something like, yeah, we can't go down to the basement because there's an airborne infection down there. And every time somebody goes down there, they become infected. So we can't go down there. I think you could have just done that like in a quicker fashion. We didn't have to have this like secret dialogue that like a whole scene with two characters we're unfamiliar with, and just kind of explaining exposition to explain a scene that we're gonna see.
Yeah, it felt a little bit clunky, and like I said, like it didn't quite execute on a few. Like it felt a little bit unbelievable on other parts. I do see what they were going for though, because like I did, one of the bodies that we saw down there had a thing that said L Park, and her last name was Park, so that was her son Leon. That she said like I had to, even my son Leon. I could see that it was like supposed to add that like emotional weight.
See, I missed that.
I saw it because it was a terrifying image of like the body that's just like imprisoned there, and all that it can do at this point is just breathe so they can like spread spores.
Right, yeah.
So like I get the idea of it. I really like the idea of it. I do think it does ratchet up the tension for me, because it does make it seem like they could use this in other ways now that they've like opened up Pandora's box to to ratchet up the tension in other places. So I do like that aspect.
But I do feel like the spores versus like the smart infected, like the smart infected ramps up the tension more to me than the spores, because like the spores seem very like centralized located things, and it's just like, as long as you avoid these things, like now that we know that there's spores in there, like it's not like, and plus Ellie doesn't get affected by airborne spores, so it would only be a concern if like Dina or Jesse go down there, or Tommy, and you just feel like that wouldn't happen. Like they're just not gonna do that. Where like having that smart infected where they're trapped in a room with 15 smart infected, that seems to me like I can avoid spores that are airborne. I can't easily outrun 15 smart ones.
So I saw on the closed captioning they were calling them stalkers.
Stalkers.
Were they in the first video game or not, or you don't remember?
I believe they are in the first video game. I believe so. And I think that the first season really focused on the clickers, which are like the blind ones.
Yep.
The like normal ones, and then like the big dude one.
What's that, a bloater?
I don't know if it's called a bloater. I can't remember.
I looked up the names of some of these, and I don't remember. Then I don't remember the old.
Then it's probably bloater if you saw that.
There were like two of them that, and then there was like the Rat King, whatever that means.
Oh, I don't know if I remember.
That might be coming up.
Yeah, I don't know if I remember the Rat King. It's also been a lot. To also preface this, I haven't played the first game in probably like 10 years now, so it's been a while. So I don't remember exact. I know it was like the big hulking dudes, the one that we saw Tommy fight, which we saw in the first season. Yeah, and I'm trying to remember in the game. Like I know that there were intense ones that would come after you, and I think they might have been the stalkers, but the stalkers also might have been added in the second game. And I know that in the first season they didn't focus a lot on the infected, and I know that was one complaint for this show in the first season, was that for a show that was about these infected, there wasn't a lot of the infected, and so we are getting a lot more infected in this season. It feels like, but then it also kind of feels like in these last two episodes, it's all we've been getting. It's been a lot of like action scenes and not a lot of like character moments. And especially for a short season that we're getting, it does seem like it feels like the last kind of 3 episodes have all been very similar. We've just really been focusing on Ellie and Dina. We've seen Ellie play guitar twice now. We talk about the baby. We're getting attacked by infected twice. We're having to deal with wolves and seraphites twice without really getting deep. Like, I feel like this season could have been way more interesting. But to me, it does seem like we're not getting enough of the point of view of the wolves and the seraphites. We've really been focusing on Ellie and Dina. And we're just getting like glimpses of these characters. And so the seraphites, they kind of seem, cultish, religious, crazy. But the wolves, I feel like the wolves, we see them more as human, like with what we saw in the opening scene, but we're not like connecting with the wolves that we're going to be dealing with. Like we didn't even see anything about Nora, which, you could have done an episode with the wolves and what they're going through and their fight with the seraphites to like make us almost like them more. But we saw Nora for like one bit in the episode, and then, Ellie offs her, and it was like I didn't really feel much for it.
Yeah. I'm curious about like the reasons behind this being 7 episodes, because that, to me, I feel like a lot of current TV has dropped to like 8 to 10 episodes is a pretty common number. Mm-hmm. I think that 7 is right below that. And you could say like that's close enough to 8. That shouldn't be weird. But to me, that feels like a short season. And since it is Max, I do question whether or not like David Zaslav had any impact in this, where it's like wouldn't green light like a certain budget. And so they like had to do this, or if it was a creative choice of like, this is what we want to do, versus like, because I don't completely trust David Zaslav and like the executives at like Warner Brothers. Did you see that they went back to HBO?
Did they go back to? Oh my gosh. Bunch of dummies running this thing.
It was HBO, then it was HBO Max, then it was Max, which like HBO is like one of the most recognizable brands for quality. And Max is the most common name for a male dog.
Is that really? I don't know. That's funny.
I think it is. So, well, anyways, yeah. So, like, I do kind of wonder about that.
I think I know why they're doing this 7 episodes.
Okay.
So this is what I'm guessing, because I did think that it was the way that the show is going to pan out is a lot different than what we're seeing. So here's my theory, because it has been greenlit for a 3rd season.
Okay.
And we know there's only 2 games.
Is there a 3rd game? Okay.
No, there's only 2 games.
Okay.
And so my theory, which I think they could have done this better with if this is true, but my theory is the 2nd season is going to be Ellie's journey, because the 2nd game is broken up into two pieces. You play Ellie's journey first, and then you play as Abby. And like you go through what Abby goes through to get to, Joel and Ellie and yada, yada, yada. Because I'm thinking that Ellie's going to be this season, and then Abby's going to be next season. Like we're going to focus through Abby's point of view in the next season.
Okay.
Which I think that they could have done it better than, if we were really going to focus on Ellie and Dina's story. I don't think they should have told us why Abby killed Joel. Just make it look completely random. And then, Ellie goes on this journey to be like, why would you do such a thing? She's super vengeful because she doesn't know. And then, Nora tells her the doctor thing. But I think it would be more impactful if there's this big showdown between Ellie and Abby. That's when Ellie finds out. And that ends with that cliffhanger that Abby was killing for that justification. And then the next season, as Abby is the protagonist, we would see why it was so important for her to kill Joel, why it was so important for her to be where she's at. And, and I think that could have done it better, but I mean, who knows? And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we'll get a nice little cleaned up version here of what happens, but yeah, that's my theory of what season 3 will be.
Interesting. I kind of wonder about like what that would be like to follow somebody that you aren't that connected with in a show. I don't feel like most shows do that. Like obviously there are some shows that are anthologies like White Lotus that will like change up the character's cast story, whatever, and they're able to get away with that a little bit more. And even like Game of Thrones, which would like off main characters, would still have other main characters that we kind of knew and loved for us to continue to follow. So like, I don't feel like we've gotten a lot of Abby.
Right.
And so that to me feels like that might be a little jarring for audiences. I have a feeling that they're going to go and try and do new material based off of absolutely nothing, but just my gut instinct. That's my guess.
Well, and also I think that's another reason why they're being so vague with the wolves and Seraphites, because I think next season, since they'll be from Abby's point of view, it will focus on more of those storylines. At least that's what I'm thinking. And especially like we only have 2 more episodes left. And I have, based on that ending of that last episode, I think it's not going to be dealing with anything that is current. Like I think it's all of the episodes is going to be probably a
flashback.
So I'm thinking if that episode and then another episode, we're not going to learn anything about Abby. And Abby seems like this, if she is the antagonist of this season, we had her for a brief flash for the first episode, and then she did something the second episode, and then we haven't seen her since. Like, I think that's such a hard, and I think the very last episode will be Ellie confronting her. And so I do think the 3rd season will be Abby's journey. Okay, but that's my theory. That's my guess.
I can see that. But I actually have liked how they've teased out the infected in this show. Like, to me, it's interesting, this idea of like them evolving. For me, it feels like it like amps up the threat, because like we didn't really even see like the really big infected until like halfway through the first season ish.
Yeah.
And for me, that was like a pretty huge moment of like, holy crap, there's other different kinds,
Right.
And like that's monstrous. Like what else is around the corner? And so for them to then have like another type that we see in season 2, episode 1, the stalker, and then to find out now that like, it can also be airborne. For me, like that may not be true to the video games, but for me, that kind of like ratchets things up and makes it really kind of puts humanity on its back feet.
Yeah, I do think so. But I think that with Last of Us 2, it's very focused on the characters and what they're going through. And I know that they have this backdrop of this infection, but I think that overall that will still take a back seat. Like, I don't know if there will be a necessary payoff with, like, I think the airborne stuff, the payoff was this episode. And I don't think we'll get much more of it being a threat in this season, or, being a like predominant, like, we got to watch out for this. Where like the smart ones might come in effect one more time in this season, potentially, but I could also see them being like, okay, well, that's we saw the payoff there where they were in a building with 15 of them and it was just the 2 of them. So I don't know if there will be payoffs in the next 2 episodes with these.
The stalkers were pretty scary because, like, to me, they reminded me of like the raptors from Jurassic Park.
Yes.
Because like I feel like the raptors also made similar type sounds.
Yeah,
whether it was like to communicate or to bait, like to get attention. Yeah. And then it felt like the same type thing where it's like she wasn't attacked head on. She was attacked from the side, or she kind of was attacked head on. And as she was dealing with that, I think the one that was really coming after her was like the one from the side. And so it felt kind of like that thing of like the one that you see in front of you, that's not the one you need to worry about.
Yeah, which also I did feel like that scene, it seemed really daunting that they weren't going to get out of that, of course. And I know they took out a couple as Ellie and Dina, but then Jesse was able to take all the other one. Like, Jesse's a badass, I guess, but
he also had a shotgun. I mean, so like,
okay.
So I think one blast from a shotgun is going to spray enough that it will take it out, versus, like you have to hit the right thing with like just a 6-shooter.
I was just impressed.
And so it could take multiple shots. So yeah, I think he had the right weapon for that.
That's fair. I was not expecting Jesse.
I was not expecting him. I was at the edge of my seat during that scene because like I really didn't know how they could get out of it. It
seemed impossible. I was thinking that the wolves were going to save them and that they were going to capture them and then from there escape and maybe deal with Abby.
Right. But it seemed like the only way was going to be with something outside. Right.
But I mean, it would make sense that they would come. I feel like they're the best. And like, I do think Tommy sees Ellie as his niece. So he would want to go save her.
Yeah.
And, Jesse has a thing for Dina. Well, kind of. So she's carrying his baby. And I don't know if
I think Jesse has a thing for Dina. I think that Dina has less of a thing for Jesse.
Right. Exactly. So it makes sense that they would go save them. And, it's a quarter of the team that they were going to send, but it's probably the 4 best people. So
right. Yeah.
It'll get the job done, hopefully.
100%. And since they said that Tommy's there, I'm sure that we'll see him. I'm sure he'll be part of, if not the next episode, because we think that maybe that'll be mainly flashback. I'm sure we'll see him in some capacity the last episode.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So yeah, so that scene was intense. I like the stalkers. I like how kind of like smart and fast they are. Like that for me really ratchets up the tension. And then it's kind of like it was interesting, the difference between getting out of that and then ending up in the world of the Seraphites. And even though we haven't learned a ton more of them, like getting to see one of their rituals was interesting, getting like a glimpse into their world.
Yeah, definitely seems like that might be the leader of the Seraphites that we saw, that one guy. But it was interesting to see that moment where they said that, remember we saw the one guy that was being tortured by Isaac. He was like, we have a wolf joining us every single day. Yes. And nobody is leaving the Seraphites to join the wolves. And then we heard that guy begging, like, I'll join you guys, like, I'll join you. And it seems like the only reason that wolves join the Seraphites is maybe to save themselves.
I don't know if that's not the impression I got. The impression I got was that wolves 100% do join out of their own free will. Wolves that are captured that then try to join in order to like prevent themselves from being disemboweled. That leader knows that that's not true.
That's true.
And so he's like, no. Like you have to believe in her in your heart. And if you don't, then you have to be cleansed.
Right.
And this is the way to cleanse you.
He did say that you were corrupted and the corrupted lie, so you can't believe anything they say. That's okay. That's fair. That's how I had originally thought, but now that you bring it up that way, I do think that you are correct, that it is more of a, he was a liar. And boy, was that pretty intense.
It was. And like we'd even seen the result of it, and yet, I don't know, seeing the mechanics of it was worse than I thought it was.
You got to feel her love. Yeah.
Especially, I don't know, I guess like I thought when I saw those like 4 people in like the previous episode, I'd assumed that like maybe it happened quickly and then they were like strung up or something like that. Versus it being like a ritual, you know, where it like takes time as it's sinking in the horror of what's going to happen. That was brutal. And yeah. I feel like that is just such an awful way to go, and just a slow ugh. I hope you're right about next season we get to see more about these, or we get to see more about them in this season. Basically, I hope we get to see more about them because I'm very curious about the Seraphites and like what brought this about, because it feels like it probably came up, you know, from the times, right? That something about what happened caused this to happen. And I wonder, is it a belief of like humanity brought this on themselves, you know, with like technology and corruption and like climate change, and like it's our fault. And that's why there's like, they're kind of like the Amish where they've like given up on tech. Like, I kind of wonder, is it something like that, or is it something different? Like I want to kind of get to know them and know what this is all about.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, from context, it seems like they're talking about the person that they are, this woman, this feel her love, I think is a person that was alive in the times after everything has fallen, and you know, almost like a Buddha, where she was an actual person that gained a following. It does seem that maybe the person that they were following has made, I don't think she was corrupted. I think maybe she did have good teachings, but like her word has been manipulated by this cultish group, and this guy has maybe taking her teachings or belief system or whatever and has kind of like warped it to be this more sadist kind of, sacrificing people type deal. But I'm very curious about it. And that's the thing. Like if next episode's a flashback episode and then we have the finale episode that's going to have to deal with, Ellie's journey, I think that we're not going to get enough about the wolves and seraphites this season.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
But now let's talk about that moment with Ellie and Nora. I think that it makes it really hard to empathize with Ellie after the action she took. Like, I mean,
it definitely was hard to empathize with Ellie, and they gave us a good kind of 1-2 punch that you don't expect. Of Nora tries to knock her off her balance by saying, what it was that Joel did, and expecting that to shock her, and she just said I know.
Yeah.
And that's, as an audience, we didn't know that. We thought that she was in the dark. I think that might be part of the fight that they kind of got into was maybe finding that out. We'll see. I think we'll see. But then the second part of the 1-2 punch. So it's so if she knows, it seems cruel to do this to somebody else, especially maybe the person that's not Abby. And so when she turned her head and saw the pipe, instantly was ugh.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if she fully knew. I think maybe she had her suspicions. We see at the end of season 1, she was what happened? And she always questioned it, but always loved Joel. So never really held him accountable for it, and was just maybe he did some fucked up shit to get me out of there, potentially. And he says he saved me, I'm not going to question it, but deep down she kind of was always it seems really weird what happened. And so then when she was saying this to her, one, she doesn't want Nora to get an upper hand on her, and Nora just saying it confirmed her suspicion. So she's just I know, it doesn't matter to me. And it will never matter to me because Joel's the only thing that mattered to me. But again, it's I want to root for Ellie, and I want Ellie to make the right decision. And yes, she technically didn't kill Nora because the spores are going to do that. But she tortures Nora by literally beating her legs with a pipe. And I feel it is hard to Ellie is the protagonist here, and it is hard to, I think, barely. Well, I mean, as a show, if you think about who are we following, who do we want to succeed? Ellie was a character that we loved in the first season, and this season,
I want her to thrive. I don't want her to succeed in this mission.
Right. So
I think that's part of the pull of this that makes it compelling, is that a person that you believe is a good person is going down a dark path that you don't want them to go down.
Right. And I mean, hitting those legs, I feel that really changes the dynamic of, is she a good person? Because that feels very bad. Yeah, that feels very bad. And it does. It's hard for me.
Especially now that she knows what they went through, which is why they did the horrible thing that they did.
Right. Ellie, you should be you're upset that your father figure was killed. You could understand why Abby would be upset that her father figure was killed, or her father was killed.
And so it's these cycles of violence that they are showing between the wolves and the Seraphites. And there was
Yeah.
a great quote. I don't remember exactly what it was. When Ellie looks into the hallway and sees that it's empty, and she says something like haunted but empty, and Dina says, just like us.
Just like us. Yeah.
You know, they like, everybody's probably haunted by their past in this world at this point. Like, I don't think anybody's, you know, maybe except for like brand new babies, you know, I think that everybody has like been impacted negatively in an awful way by this world.
Yeah.
Everybody's seen something horrible happen to them. And I think that unfortunately, right now, I think Ellie kind of is empty. I think she just maybe found this like source of like hope and love that maybe if she can attach herself to, maybe it can redeem her. But right now she's empty without Joel, and she is doing terrible things because of it. And it's very sad and hard to watch.
Yeah. And I do feel like it's because, right, like you want to root for Ellie becoming a father and living happily ever after with Dina. But then I feel like the juxtaposition between how this episode ended, how she treated Nora, I just feel like you could have just left her to die. But like trying to figure out where Abby is, still on the path, and just like, I'm going to break her legs. Like, I just, that's a road I don't know if I can follow.
I know. Which for me, it does make it, as long as they land it right, it makes it compelling.
Yes.
Like there's a difference between like not wanting something because I feel like it's bad writing and so I don't enjoy it, and then there's another aspect of like not wanting something because you don't always get what you want, you know?
Right.
And sometimes like things like these are tough and complex situations, and if they land it right, I think this could be a very fulfilling storyline. If they don't, I think it could be really crappy to see, you know, her go down this road. Like, I mean, like you watch like Breaking Bad, it was very compelling watching a person go down a dark path for like 5 seasons, however much it was, you know?
Yeah. That's true.
And it was like incrementally, bit by bit, and they managed to make it compelling. I really don't want that to happen to her.
Yeah. And I feel like with Breaking Bad, it was such small increments that you keep...
They were tiny.
Like, you keep part of you thinking, like, he could redeem himself. He's just doing this to help his family. And then you see him doing some, like, really, like, by season 4, he's, like, you know, being mean to his wife. He's being mean to his kid. You're like,
every time he crossed a line the first time, you could see the reason why, you know,
right.
Like there was such a crappy thing that he was dealing with that it's like, oh, I get it. But it's like, once that line has been crossed, he didn't generally uncross it. And so then like the stuff he would casually do, you know, from that like he wouldn't have done before was so painful.
Yeah, it definitely was.
So yeah,
man, but hopefully they land it with her.
Yeah,
but I am excited for the next episode because it does feel like we're going to get some Pedro back, which, you know, I love Pedro.
And I saw in the news with like interviews of him that we were getting him back. So like I was looking forward to seeing some more Pedro, even if it is just in flashbacks.
But I do think this next episode is going to put more context on their relationship of what they experienced after season 1. And I think it's going to make us feel even more sad. Get ready for that. I think we're going to get a lot of... Get your tissues ready, folks, because I think it's going to be sad.
Yeah.
But with that, I think our journey has come to an end. Thank you folks so much for joining along with us. Come back next week as we do Last of Us Season 2, Episode 6. We look forward to having you there. But until then, I'm Mark. This is Sterling.
Thanks.